Hey everyone, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the pros and the cons of the Omnipod insulin pump. So this video, I'm not going to be addressing any of the pros and cons of an insulin pump in general. These are only going to be one specific to the Omnipod. I do have a video on the pros and cons of an insulin pump on my channel, and I will put that in the iCards, and I will also put it on the end screen for those who are interested. But like I said, this is just going to be about the Omnipod today. Now, the first thing that I'm going to mention is one thing that can be a pro and a con of the Omnipod insulin pump, and it really depends on how you feel about it, and that is the automatic 3-day expiry. After 72 hours, your pump will expire, and you have about an 8-hour window from the point that it expires to change it. However, you have to change it after the pump is expired. The reason this is a pro and a con at the same time is simply because the 3-day expiry means that you cannot cheat and keep your site on longer than you should. You cannot leave a site on for like weeks at a time. However, if it expires before, say, you've run out of insulin or at a time that it is not convenient for you to change, there is really no way around that. So that is why it's a pro and a con, because it can kind of save yourself from getting too much scar tissue by forcing you to change it, but it also forces you to change it, and that might not be convenient, or you may lose insulin in the deal. But now onto the actual pros and cons. I'm going to start with the pros because that's just generally what I like to do. So with that being said, let's get into it. So the first pro, and this is the number one reason that people get the Omnipod, is that it is tubeless. There is no tubes to the Omnipod. It is just a simple pod. And I'll show you right now. It's on my leg right here. You might be able to see it. Maybe you can't. This is all there is to it. There is nothing on my waistband, as you can see. It is just what's on my leg right now. Now, being tubeless means that you don't get your pump tubing caught on doorknobs. You don't get it caught by maybe your dog if your dog is jumping up. I've had my dog rip my pump side out before when she jumps up on me and her paw gets caught and she rips it out. I've had it caught on exercise machines at the gym and rip out, and I don't have that experience anymore. The next pro, once again, to the Omnipod being tubeless, is simply the available sites that you can put your Omnipod. You don't have the restrictions of how long tubing is or anything like that, so you can really put your pump wherever you want it. I have seen people put it on their forearms before. I've seen people put it on their chest. I've seen people put it on their shoulder blade. I don't know how they do that. I have bones there. That sounds painful, but I've seen it. I have also seen people put it here on their leg, right there. I'm a generally small person, so I never really had that issue, but there are a lot of people with tubed pumps that are pretty much restricted to just their abdomen or their lower back because their tubing just couldn't reach their arms or their legs. The next pro, once again, has to do with it being tubeless, and that is it's easy to wear with all types of clothing. And when you have a tubed pump, it is very difficult to figure out where to put it. And with the Omnipod, you don't have that issue. You do not have to worry about pockets and other places to put your pump. You don't have to worry about making sure that your pump has a clip or what to do if the clip breaks. Basically, you don't have to worry about where you're clipping your pump, that it's not going to get damaged or that it is going to fall off. Now, the last pro that I'm going to say, and this one has to do with its waterproof ability, and that is that you don't have to disconnect it when you're going swimming, when you're having a bath, when you're having a shower. One thing that is really nice about that is you simply do not have to worry about your pump getting wet. You don't have to worry about how long you're underwater. Pumps generally are seen as waterproof, but that's when they're in mint condition. There's no scratches, there's no cracks, and you cannot 100% predict that your pump is flawless. So those are all of the pros that I have for the Omnipod insulin pump. The pros definitely outweighed the cons for a lot of people. I know it did for me, but like with any insulin pump, there's going to be some downsides. There's going to be some cons that you're going to have to think about when you're choosing your insulin pump. So I'm going to get into those right now. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that it is noticeable. your pod, no matter where you wear it, is going to be very noticeable on your body. Like I showed you on my leg earlier, you can probably see it. You can see it right there. So it is kind of hard to hide. The only way to really hide it is if you keep it on your torso and you generally wear baggier clothing or heavy sweatshirts. Now, the next con I'm going to get into is something called a screamer pod. And basically, if your pod fails, it will become what is known as a screamer. And this basically means that your pod will emit a very loud screeching noise, no matter where you are or what you are doing. You can either disconnect it with your PDM, but sometimes it does not disconnect with your PDM, and you either have to smash it with a hammer, put it in a freezer, or jam the back of it with a paper clip. I've only had to deal with this once, and I've had the Omnipod for about 6 months now. It definitely kept me off the Omnipod for quite a long time. Now, the next con that I'm going to say has to do with the pro/con that I mentioned earlier of the 3-day expiry, is the potential to lose insulin. All your insulin is in the little pod. If something happens where your pod falls off prematurely, or if it expires before your insulin is used up, you are out that amount of insulin. That could be quite costly overall if you are throwing away insulin. As you use your pod more and more, you'll start to learn how much insulin to put in it, that you run out of insulin at the same time that the pod expires. But this isn't going to work every single time, of course. And like I said, if it fails early, you're going to lose some insulin. Now, this final con kind of caters a little bit more to the parents of young diabetics. And you're watching this video considering whether or not you want to get your child an insulin pump. However, there is a minimum amount of insulin that you have to put in your pod in order for it to work. And this minimum is 80 units. Some children have very, very low insulin requirements. And basically what this means is that you might not use 80 units, but you'll have to put 80 units into your pump anyways in order for your pod to work. That is one thing to keep in mind, is that if you have very, very low insulin requirements, you cannot put any less than 80 units into your pod. Meanwhile, on a tubed pump, there generally isn't any minimums. You can put in as much or as little as you want. Now, those are the pros and cons of the Omnipod insulin pump that either affected me when I was choosing my pump, or I know affected other people when they were looking into their insulin pump. So I hope you found this video helpful, and maybe it helped you make your decision on whether or not you wanted to choose or not choose the Omnipod insulin pump. If you want to see more videos like this, then make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, guys.